Israel is preparing for the release of hostages from Gaza in the next 24 hours as the ceasefire with Hamas enters its third day. The terror group has until midday tomorrow, local time, to release the hostages. Israel's prison service says prisoner transfers have already begun. Around 2,000 Palestinian prisoners are going to be released as part of that deal. President Trump is going to be making his way to Egypt later today, arriving there tomorrow. He'll also, in the next few days, be addressing the Israeli Knesset and meeting the families of the hostages. Let's speak to Arieh Kovler, who is political analyst in Jerusalem. Morning to you.
Good morning.
First of all, let's talk about those incredible scenes out of Hostage Square last night. Steve Witkoff addressing up to 400,000 people. Fascinating that there was such love for Trump, not surprising. But the boos for Benjamin Netanyahu when he was mentioned, did that surprise you?
No, not at all. The crowds that attended the hostage protests are almost universally opponents of the government, the Israeli government strategy, which has, at least publicly and domestically to Israelis, been that the hostages are really a second and third priority in this war. And amongst those people campaigning for their release in Israel, there's always been a lot of anger at the government, and these rallies have been putting pressure on the Israeli government. So it doesn't surprise me at all to hear the kind of Netanyahu and the government cast as the bad guys by the protesters and the celebrators, I guess I should call them now.
Yes, of course. And, you know, we're expecting this release in the next 24 hours. Are we clear how the hostages are going to be handed over? We know, of course, there's not going to be those grotesque images of them being paraded by Hamas fighters. But are we clear on what will happen?
I think as much clarity as you might expect. Israel isn't even really sure if it's going to happen today or tomorrow, although it seems like indications are leaning towards a handover tomorrow morning. Supposedly, Hamas has been gathering those hostages who are alive, perhaps in one place, perhaps in 2 or 3 different points of the strip. They'll be handed over kind of privately and quietly to the Red Cross, who will then drive them across the border to Israel, to the IDF, where they'll be kind of quickly perhaps reunited with 1 or 2 family members and then helicoptered off to hospital. There are a couple of hospitals who've already prepared beds for them and are waiting to have them, where they're likely to stay for a few weeks until they're strong enough to kind of function in day-to-day life.
Let's talk about there's the countdown now, isn't there, to President Trump's arrival in the region. We know he's going to be going to Egypt to that signing. There's also going to be this summit of world leaders. How significant do you think it is that these sort of 20 world leaders are going to be joining President Trump, with the effort being to try and move this ceasefire deal from phase 1 to phase 2? Is that pressure needed, do you think, to keep the peace process moving?
Yeah, well, look, he's actually coming here to Jerusalem tomorrow, very briefly, as it's before the Jewish Simchat Torah festival, just for a few hours, coming, going and heading off to Egypt. The summit is very interesting, not least because Israel isn't invited. A lot of countries are, both kind of Western-minded countries and those associated with the Arab world. There was even a report that Iran was invited, although that hasn't been confirmed. But Israel excluded. There seems to be a real effort by the Trump administration to build this kind of pressure and momentum for some kind of a post-war plan for Gaza, and supposedly more than just that as well, looking at potentially expanding bilateral peace relationships between Israel and other countries in the region, moving towards a Palestinian state. This is obviously something Israel heavily opposes, but pretty much everyone else, even the Americans, kind of want to happen. So I think this could be a very interesting moment. Obviously, it's happening very quickly. Normally, the international summits have months of what they call Sherpaing, where the kind of people who actually know things go out and meet. So by the time the summit happens, it's really just a rubber stamp. This hasn't happened now. It's been organised in just a day or 2. So we'll have to see what comes out of it. But there is this kind of real attempt to try and take the momentum of this deal and see where they can take it. And
the fact that Israel isn't invited to that summit, is this all part, do you think, of President Trump's almost power play, the power that he's clearly exerting over Prime Minister Netanyahu, and just letting him know that essentially Trump is in charge here?
I think that's a part of it. Look, he's going to come into town here in Jerusalem. He's going to rock up to the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, which is being recalled just to hear him speak. I'm sure there'll be lots of mutual love both ways from Netanyahu and Trump about how great each one is. But then, to then come a day or two later to this summit where Israel is not there, kind of sends its own message, both to Israel and to the other countries. This ceasefire is happening because essentially Trump gave his personal guarantee to Qatar and through them to Hamas that Israel will not return to fighting. Israel hasn't said that. So there's kind of a lot of going on here in terms of who's in charge and who at the moment at least is taking orders.
We're getting reports from Gaza, started coming out yesterday, that Hamas is remobilising. It's calling for its fighters to move into the areas which have been vacated by Israeli forces. How dangerous a moment are we heading into now in light of things like that happening?
Look, I think that, I don't think it's particularly likely that Hamas is about to attack Israel. That would be extraordinarily idiotic. I do think that what we saw in the January ceasefire was after, a year and a half of a very difficult war, Hamas kind of returning to the streets and Israelis thinking, okay, did we win? Did we lose? With rules to remove them from power, and here they are, with their face masks and their guns and their green headbands. What we're seeing so far is the kind of civilian authorities in Gaza that's run by Hamas, but they look like normal policemen returning to the streets. We haven't really seen the kind of Al-Qassam terrorists out on the streets yet. But I think it does put political pressure domestically in Israel to see Hamas still standing. Now, of course, this deal is supposed to end with the removal of Hamas as the government of Gaza voluntarily. But, if that doesn't happen, if it takes months and months and we still see Hamas rebuilding in Gaza, I think that puts medium and long-term pressure on Netanyahu and on Israelis about, was this war won?
Is it clearer yet regarding aid? We understand that the crossings are going to open, up to 600 lorries a day sending aid into Gaza. As yet, we understand there's still only one crossing open. Is that right? Do we know when more crossings are going to open to essentially flood Gaza with aid?
No, I'm less clear on that. It does seem like in the last few weeks, since the big international push over aid, there's been substantially more aid going into Gaza. The issue has been where is it reaching inside Gaza? Most of the trucks that went in were immediately hijacked by some or other armed faction, and the UN said, look, at least it's going to people, but better than nothing. The big push will be to get aid into northern Gaza, into Gaza City, where there has been very limited aid in recent weeks in light of the Israeli offensive. Most of the challenges around aid in this period have essentially been logistical. Israel said, oh, we'll let as many trucks as you like in. You've got to pick them up. They're just sitting on the border. The UN has said, well, we can't pick them up because it's not safe. Israel said, well, we can't bring Hamas to pick them up because we're at war with them. Those are the issues that hopefully will be quickly resolved, and we might see a very big increase in aid. Once that big stockpile of trucks that's been sitting on the border now for weeks begins to go down, then we'll know things are working.
Why won't Israel just open all the borders now? There are all those border crossings.
Well, the moment it seems like, Israel is still controlling half the strip, about 53%, including all the border crossings and all the areas immediately around the border crossings. So it's not just a matter of opening the border crossings. Once they cross the border, they're in Israeli-controlled territory until they get to a place where it can be taken into the Hamas-controlled part. And then someone needs to come and pick it up. And who is that? Is that Hamas? Is that the UN itself? But then those trucks get hijacked. Is it mercenaries? There's just been a lot of kind of challenges and pressures. The other issue is Israel is still saying it is checking every single truck for smuggling. And look, we know there's smuggling going on. We know we've seen ads for the iPhone 17 being sold in Gaza. That's being smuggled in by someone. And the theory is if they could smuggle that, maybe they're smuggling weapons too. So Israel's trying to check every truck. That takes a long time. And I need the infrastructure to do that. But I think obviously we will see, I hope, in the coming weeks and months, a much broader range of things going in, including construction materials once they start rebuilding.